Hi everyone, thanks for joining in with our first devotional in the book of Esther. These short videos are designed to be preparation for our home groups who will be meeting next week via Zoom, and they're going to be using the Good Book Guide to Esther as they study together. So each week that there is a home group, the week before that, either Gary or myself will put up one of these videos with a quick overview of the chapter that's going to be studied in the home group the next week. Even if you don't belong to a home group, please do follow along with these videos and hopefully they'll be of some use to you. I think one of the things that our current society takes real pride in is seeing themselves as being better, as smarter and more developed than the societies which have preceded them. I think that's probably fair to say of each generation of society that we've seen throughout history. They pride themselves in and brag about being bigger and a better society for people to live in. And when we look at it, it is impossible to deny that when it comes to medicine, technology, travel and other things, we do live in a society which is more advanced than what has come before us. But perhaps we bear a lot more similarities to any society before us than we would like to admit. Because in Esther 1 we have a society which seems to hold dear the exact same things as ours does. Power and influence, wealth and materialism, strength and fame, alcohol and entertainment. That's the society that we find in Susa, one of the Persian Empire's capitals. And we're introduced to someone who seems to exemplify all of those things, King Xerxes. And what we see in the opening chapter is a king who we could pretty confidently say is fairly proud of himself. He's throwing a massive and long party to display the wealth and the might that he has, to bring glory to himself. He's saying, look at what I have, look at what I can do. And to be honest, if you read chapter 1, especially verses 48, it is pretty amazing what he has. Yet as impressive as it all is, we almost immediately see the foolishness of it. Because the king, overcome by too much alcohol and perhaps the pride that he must be feeling from this admiration of his guests, he wants to boost his ego some more by showing off his wife to those who are in attendance. But after her refusal and after a quick discussion with his advisors, he banishes her in his anger. This is the society in which the Jews find themselves. Esther is set around 100 years after the Jews were exiled to Babylon. Some of them had returned to Jerusalem, but really many of them continued in exile, including in Susa. So what we see in Esther 1 is the king who ruled them. We see the society that they lived in. And boy, they must have really felt like the exiles that they were, knowing this wasn't their home, not celebrating the things that everyone celebrated, not desiring what everyone else desired. Perhaps this scenario meant that they started to doubt God. They would think back to the promise that had been made to Abraham and how God had carried through those promises by giving them the land that they were promised. They would think back to the covenant that God had with them to be their God, and they would be his people who he protected and who he provided for. Yet here they were, having been disobedient, defeated by their enemies and exiled to a foreign land. Disappointment, doubtful, unhappy, angry. These are all ways that Israel may have felt as they reflected on their circumstances. Yet these verses are not just random events that have been recorded. You see, they show us that God has not abandoned his people, that God does not abandon his people. Because what happens in this passage is putting the wheels in motion for how God will rescue Israel, which means he continued to fulfill his promise to them. At the start of the video, I suggested that people maybe haven't changed all that much over the centuries. I guess that is open to argument. But what is for sure is that God is still the same. He is still in control over all things. He is still faithful to the promises that he has made. Esther 1 is the beginning of a story where God's people are doubting him. They are unsure of his presence because of the circumstances that they face. And maybe that sounds familiar to you. Perhaps as you look at the state of the world or our society, maybe even because of something personal to you, like losing a loved one or an illness that you're having to face. It might make you begin to wonder if God is doing anything. In fact, it might make you wonder, is he even there? Well, I hope that these are reassuring words from Romans 8:28. They say, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. God never changes. God never abandons his people. Regardless of circumstances, he is there. And not only is he there, but he is working for good. I find it really interesting that God's name isn't mentioned at any point throughout the book of Esther. It seems probably quite strange to us. It seems to be very counterproductive to what the Bible seeks to achieve. But while it is the case that his name is not mentioned, I think we find that God's presence, his work, his faithfulness screams from the pages of Esther. Something which I hope that you will find clear time and time and time again as we study this book over the next few weeks.